Why do you want to be executed?
I have to be. Because I will kill again. No, I would do it again. I've been molesting kids nonstop since I was 13 years old, over half my life. Anything happened, I can guarantee I'd do it again, and sooner or later I would kill another child. I've done it before, and at the time I liked it.
In 1989, Wesley Allen Dodd confessed to killing 3 children. He murdered brothers William Neer, 10, and Cole Neer, 11, in a Vancouver park before strangling 4-year-old Leah Seeley a month later. In 1990, he was sentenced to death and given the choice between lethal injection or hanging. He chose hanging and dropped all appeals, convinced that he deserved to die. He stated multiple times that he would kill again and enjoyed every moment of committing these heinous crimes. He was hanged on January 5th, 1993. His last words were, "Someone once asked me, I don't remember who, but they asked me, is there any way to stop sex offenders? I said no, but I was wrong. There is hope and there is peace. I found both in the Lord. Look to him and you will find peace." Those were indeed powerful words.
You know, am I pure evil? Am I the face of terror sitting here in front of you? Or am I able to talk to you man to man?
Most people in this country think you are the face of evil, don't they?
They do. But sitting down here now, and let me make clear, I'm not sitting here trying to influence you. And I'm not putting on a game face. I'm not conning anybody.
Timothy McVey was dubbed the Oklahoma City Bomber in 1995. After his homemade bomb killed 149 people and 19 children in front of a federal government building in Oklahoma. He was sentenced to death, and when the time came for his execution in 2001, he chose to remain silent throughout the lethal injection process. However, he left a message with his final words, quoting the last lines of a poem by William Ernest Henley. McVey was executed by lethal injection on June 11, 2001. His final written words were, "I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul." If you asked any of the families of the Oklahoma City bombing victims, they would say he got off easy. And looking at others on this list, that seems true.
For those people who have been given the death penalty, who have been convicted of taking another's life, what should society do?
Okay, well, one of the main arguments of the death penalty is that it will potentially deter other people from committing crimes.
Do you think it will?
Definitely not.
The case of Robert Sullivan is an interesting one. He was convicted of killing Donald Schmidt, an employee at the Howard Johnson restaurant where Sullivan worked. Schmidt was shot twice in the head with a rifle in 1972. Sullivan was on death row for over 10 years and fought the death penalty with support from figures like Pope John Paul II. Unfortunately for Sullivan, he failed to convince the Supreme Court that the death penalty was a cruel and ineffective punishment. He was executed by electric chair on December 1st, 1983. Sullivan's last words, after fighting against the cause of his death, were, "Despite what is about to happen to me, do not give up. I bear no grudges. May God bless us all." Sullivan spent most of his incarceration not fighting the charges against him, but the punishment itself, and his last words expressed his defeat and lack of victory.
Are you frightened about next week?
Well, death is death. A person said one time, he said, "That's a horrible way of dying." I said, "What is a good way? Could you tell me what a good way is to die?"
Billy Wayne Cobell was arrested for killing Robert and Zelda Visha and their son Bobby Visha in 1989. They were the parents and brother of his estranged wife. Before killing the Visha family, he went to their home and tied up his wife and daughters. Cobell is the oldest man to be executed in Texas in the last 100 years. The death penalty was reinstated in Texas in 1982, a decade before Cobell's crimes led to his imprisonment and eventual execution. Cobell was executed by lethal injection on February 28, 2019. His last words were, "Yes, sir, that will be $5. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you, Mike. I love you. Where's Nellie? I love you. That will be $5. Goodbye." I don't know what he meant by the $5, but when he said it, He was addressing his family of 5, from Texas to Florida, from a lesser-known killer to a notorious one. Let's continue.
My experience with, I say pornography generally, but with pornography that deals on a violent level with the sexuality, is that once you become addicted to it, and I look at this as a kind of addiction, like other kinds of addiction, I would keep looking for more potent, more explicit, more graphic kinds of material. Like an addiction, you keep craving something which is harder, something which gives you a greater sense of excitement.
Ted Bundy is one of the world's most infamous serial killers. His life has been the subject of many documentaries due to his violent and abusive acts throughout the 1970s. Bundy killed over 30 women, and his last words, according to many, were merely a social plea from a deranged person seeking sympathy from those he harmed. However, this does not necessarily mean they meant what they said, and the matter remains a secret buried with Bundy. His last words were chilling to many, given the nature of his heinous crimes. Bundy was executed in the electric chair on January 24, 1989. His last words were, "Tell my family and friends I love them. Ted, you truly were a strange and deranged individual." The word deranged is fitting. Deranged people hide their true thoughts in their heads, and it's impossible to know what goes on in their minds. We are not sure if the true nature of Ted Bundy's thoughts will ever be known or understood. Here is an example that shows we may never know what goes on in the mind of a deranged person.
How have you prepared yourself for tomorrow morning?
I'm all right with it. Yeah, I'm ready to go. Hey, I was tortured at BCI.
Aileen Wuornos was a deadly serial killer. In 1989 and 1990, more than 7 bodies of middle-aged white men were discovered in various locations in Central Florida. They had been robbed and shot before Wuornos stole their cars. Wuornos never regretted her actions and lost her chance to avoid execution when she declared she would kill again if released. Throughout her imprisonment, she accused guards and inmates of tampering with her food and torturing her. Wuornos was executed by lethal injection on October 9, 2002. Describing her last words as strange might be an understatement. Before her execution, Wuornos looked at the executioner and the audience and said her haunting words, "I'd just like to say I'm sailing with the Rock, and I'll be back like Independence Day with Jesus, June 6th, like the movie, Big Mothership and all. I'll be back." What are you saying? We haven't finished with them and their madness. Let's continue. The next serial killer on death row was a religious man.
A serial killer comes about by circumstances and like a recipe: poverty, drugs, child abuse. These things, contribute to a person, to a person's frustration and anger, and at some point in life, he explodes.
Richard Ramirez spread terror and fear in California in 1984 and 1985 and was dubbed the Night Stalker. He broke into homes across Los Angeles using various weapons like guns, knives, and hammers to kill his victims. Ramirez did not discriminate among his victims. The youngest was 6 years old, and the oldest was 83. Before killing his victims, he raped them. In 1989, this serial killer and Satan worshiper was brought to justice. He was sentenced to death for committing 13 murders, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults, and 13 burglaries. After being sentenced to death, Richard Ramirez died before his execution in 2013. His last words were, "Hail Satan." This matter is very strange, as the next serial killer might be the devil himself.
That one mother that gets on television all the time who thinks I should be given 33 injections, I think she ought to take 33 Valiums and go lay down.
He was known as the Killer Clown, John Wayne Gacy. Gacy killed more than 33 young men and boys. He lured his victims by promising them jobs, drugs, or money in exchange for sex. He would pick them up from the street or deceive them by showing a police badge. Before killing and burying the bodies, Gacy tortured his victims. In his private life, Gacy was a member of the Jolly Joker Clown Club, which was one reason for his nickname, the Clown. Another reason was that he would tell his victims, "This is the last trick. after performing many tricks on them as a means of torture. John Wayne Gacy was executed by lethal injection on May 10, 1994. His last words, which confirmed his lack of empathy for people, were, "Kiss my ass." In the end, John Wayne Gacy was nothing more than a clown. We can imagine that his character's name was Bozo. Well, Bozo's act has been stopped, and we thank the Lord for that. The next serial killer awaiting execution was a fighter who resisted the same death penalty that claimed the lives of many on this list, but he did not succeed despite trying hard.
It caught me off guard. I didn't expect it. I didn't think mine would be the first one signed. After it was signed, though, well, it was just something he had to accept.
John Spanklink was a lost man accused of killing a travel companion. Spanklink never wavered in his belief that what he did was self-defense. He was the first man sentenced to death in Florida after the U.S. Supreme Court reinstated the death penalty in 1976. Spanklink was executed in the electric chair on May 25, 1979. His last words, commenting on the death penalty system as a whole, were, "Capital punishment means those without the capital get the punishment." For everyone on this list, John Spanklink resisted the reinstatement of the death penalty in the United States, but he did not succeed and ended up being the first person in Florida to be sentenced to death. The last serial killer with us is not another person from Florida. After these inmates sentenced to death in Florida, there is a question. Can Florida itself be arrested and sentenced for multiple murders?
I mean, you're a board that dispenses privilege, and I've always thought that privileges were sought, desired, earned, and deserved. And I seek nothing from you. I don't desire anything from you. I haven't earned anything, I don't deserve anything either.
Gary Gilmore was the first man executed after the Supreme Court allowed the resumption of the death penalty in the United States in 1976. Gilmore was convicted of killing a hotel manager in Utah, so he was sentenced to death. There is a strange fact here. Dan Whedon, the executive director of advertising at Nike, credited Gilmore's last words as the inspiration for the company's slogan. Gary Gilmore was executed by firing squad on January 17, 1977. His last words were, "Let's do it." The interesting thing about all these serial killers is that the punishment varies depending on the circumstances. We should know that the punishment does not always fit the crime, but there is no agreement among everyone on what the actual punishment can cause.